On today's Story Beat.
I would just say to write what you know best. Write from your heart, because that's where your best songs are going to come from. When I wrote "The Better Love Is, the Worse It Is When It's Over," that was true for me. Also, when you write from personal experience, that is, I think, the best songs come from there.
This is StoryBeat with Steve Cuden, a podcast for the creative mind. StoryBeat explores how masters of creativity develop and produce brilliant works that people everywhere love and admire. So join us as we discover how talented creators find success in the worlds of imagination and entertainment. Here now is your host, Steve Cuden.
Thanks for joining us on StoryBeat. We're coming to you from the Steel City, Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. My guest today, Adryan Russ, writes music and lyrics for theater, film, television, and recordings. Her off-Broadway musical Inside Out, co-written with playwright Doug Haverty, played the Cherry Lane Theater in New York and has been produced in many theaters across the US, in Europe, and for 3 years in Belgrade, Serbia. Also co-written with Doug Haverty, the musicals Love Again and iGhost, which is a modern telling of the Canterville Ghost, were produced in Los Angeles. Her CD, Everyone Has a Story, showcases cabaret and theater songs. The CD, Changing My Tune, features jazz-based new standards co-written with Joel Evans. One appears in the film Doubt, others in Netflix's Holidate and Disney Plus's WandaVision, and yet another was selected by the Australian Discovery Orchestra for Broadway Records CD, 16 Stories, New American Musicals. Legendary songstress Sue Raney recorded Adryan's song Late in Life, co-written with Shelly Markham. Barry White recorded Adryan's The Better Love Is, the Worse It Is When It's Over, and the song Fire in Me is performed by emerging artist Luara. A longtime member of ASCAP, the Dramatists Guild, and the Recording Academy, Adryan has served on the board of the Society of Composers and Lyricists. Please stick around after the show because Adryan has generously lent us 2 great songs to enjoy: Top of the World, co-written with Joel Evans and sung by Adam James, and Matters of the Heart, co-written with Doug Haverty and sung by Tammy Tappan Damiano. So for all those reasons and many more, I'm delighted to welcome one of the best songwriters working today, Adryan Russ, to StoryBeat. Adryan, thanks so much for joining me.
Oh my gosh, what a wonderful introduction. Thank you so much. I'm going, yes, I did that. Yes, I did that. Oh my God.
and amazingly enough, you did.
Amazingly, yeah, I must have been alive a long time. Okay.
Well, we're not going to even begin to explore that. Though the first question is, we're going to go back in time a little bit. And so at what point in your life, how old were you when the musical bug, and I don't mean musical theater, I mean music, when did that come into your life?
Wow, it started pretty early. My first memory of when I grew up in Chicago, and my family lived in an apartment, and there was a grand piano that a family person had contributed and just gave us. So as a child, the piano was always there, and I would just go there and fool around on the piano. My mother sort of noticed that I was doing that, and she decided to take me to a relative, my Aunt Fanny, whose son Theodore Letvin was a concert pianist, and she wanted to ask her, should I give Adryan piano lessons? So I went there, and the funny thing is, she sat at the keyboard. My aunt sat at the keyboard and played a note, and my first guess, was a guess, and I said, I think it's C, and she said yes, and then after that she played other notes, and I realized I had relative pitch, so I could name the rest of the notes she played. She said, absolutely, give her piano lessons. Wow. So that's where it sort of started there. My family always loved music. There was always music playing in the house.
And about how old were you then?
I was 5.
Oh, wow. So you were a little girl at that point.
I was, absolutely.
And you had this gift of being able to find pitch quite easily.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something not everybody is born with.
No.
I realize that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's something that you're very lucky that you have.
Yeah, I realize that now, especially.
And do you find that that's very useful when you get into a recording studio?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm trying to think of particular times when that's been helpful. Just in writing a song, just having relative pitch, knowing I'm hearing a melody I want to go to, and just knowing, where to go to get that.
Sure.
Yeah,
Sure.
yeah,
So,
absolutely.
all right. So who were your earliest influences and inspirations? Who did you look up to even as a little girl and think, wow, that's something I'd really like to try to do?
Well, I'm trying to think. Really little. I don't have a lot of memories from back there when I was 5. But
Right.
as I was growing up, I mean, the people I loved were the pop writers, Paul Simon, Joni Mitchell, Judy Collins, the Eagles. I mean, those were my go-to people.
Mhm.
And then a little later, as I was in college, I went to the University of Illinois. A friend and I decided to take a trip to New York, and because we heard about this amazing woman who was on Broadway in Funny Girl.
And who might that be?
That would be the amazing Barbara Streisand.
Indeed.
And so I got to see her in Funny Girl.
Oh, wow.
I'm kind of revealing my age here, but I got to see her do it. And I said to my friend, oh my God, I now know what I want to do. And he said, you want to be on that stage? And I said, no, I wish I could just write those songs. Those songs are amazing. So I think that's what sort of a turning point for me. Just seeing a Broadway show and thinking, God, I'd love to do that.
It's interesting. So you went to see this Broadway show as a young woman, and you didn't want to be a performer then. You wanted to be a writer.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely.
And was it because you didn't think about performance, or did the stage, were you not a good singer, or what stopped you from even wanting to go down that road?
That's a good question. I think I was terrified of being in front of people. I wound up doing some cabaret things. I went to the cabaret symposium, but that was all to promote my writing. So I have performed. It's been a long time, but I have performed in front of people at Catalina Bar and Grill and Vitello's and all of that. And even the Troubadour long ago and far away.
The legendary Troubadour with many great acts. Well,
Yeah,
Elton John, the Eagles got their big break there.
God.
Linda Ronstadt, there were huge acts that came
Linda
out.
Ronstadt, yeah, you're naming all my favorites.
And so they were all influences at an early stage too.
They were, absolutely. I mean, I just listened to their music all the time. I just love their songs. And I think they sort of programmed the kind of songwriting I wanted to do, the verse, chorus, or the verse, bridge, verse.
So you started to study songwriting at that point then?
I did.
Was it a formal study, or was it just your own study?
It was my own study to start with, and when I actually after college I went to the Peace Corps. When I came out of the Peace Corps, I took piano lessons from someone, because I realized in those 2 years I lived in Medellin, Colombia. After those 2 years, I realized that there were a lot of people. There's a lot of Colombian music that I loved. We learned to play the guitar, and actually I learned earlier than that, but just playing the guitar a lot, I realized that I just wanted to do more of that.
So in other words, your inspiration early was Barbara Streisand and Funny Girl and all these grand artists. And then you had to go to a foreign country in the Peace Corps in order to really start digging into what you wanted to do.
Yeah, which is interesting, isn't it? Because the Peace Corps wasn't for me to find myself. It was to go help other people.
What I love about it is, and what I wanted the listeners to hear in your story, is that there is no one simple path, and your path was somewhat circuitous to begin the process, let alone get anywhere with it.
That's true. Sometimes paths are circuitous. I had the honor for the Society of Composers and Lyricists, recently interviewing the amazing Lin-Manuel Miranda.
Oh,
and
wow.
he told me about his process of all he wanted to be when he was 5 was Steven Spielberg. So it's taken him a while to get to be a director. So so you're right. We all have different progress, different plans, different paths.
Well, I would say his recent movie Tick, Tick, Boom as a director shows incredible artistic. Well, he's been an amazing artist for quite some time, but this showed a directorial side that I don't think anybody knew about, and it's quite evident he's very good at it.
Absolutely.
So all right, so I'm going to ask you a question I asked lots of guests on the show. It's not necessarily an easy question to answer, which is, what for you, when you're listening to songs, what for you makes a good song good?
I guess part of it is it memorable for some reason? I know that could be the melody, the lyric, something that stays with you so that you either want to hear it again or you can't get it out of your head. Something that it has to be something that moves me in some way, either, makes me feel love or anger or just some sort of emotion.
Well, music is emotional. Yes. I mean,
Yeah,
it wants to hit you in your gut. It wants to give you some
yeah,
sense of something that isn't necessarily intellectual.
that's true. Yeah, although it can be both.
Sure, of course,
Yeah.
obviously Bach is very intellectual and academic, and
Mhm.
some artists, some musicians and songwriters are not so intellectual. They're more emotional than they are intellectual. But
Mhm.
it really has to hit you somewhere in your gut, I think.
Absolutely. Well, for me, that's true. Is that true for you too? May I ask you a
It
question?
absolutely it is. It is about emotion. It is, how does it make you feel? I lectured recently in St. Louis on a whole other topic, had nothing to do with this, and the big part of it was about the entertainment industry is about selling passion. We don't sell intellectuality or academics. We sell passion,
That's right. Yeah.
and it's all forms of it, including songwriting, including playwriting, including all forms of writing.
Mhm.
All right, so do you have songs that you've written that you still can't get out of your head, that they're stuck in your head, you created something brilliant like that?
Um, yeah, I mean, it's usually something the most recent, that I can't get out of my head.
Hmm.
But some songs, like from the musical that I co-wrote with Doug from Inside Out, those songs have stayed with me through time because, and we've had many productions, which is great, but they've stayed with me because they're based on a personal experience. So I think that's part of it too. I mean, this was about a women's therapy group, and I was in one, and that's what triggered the idea for the musical. So I think they stay with me for that reason, that they hit a personal part of my life.
It gets you in the spine, doesn't it?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. In the heart too.
All right, so let's talk about songwriting and the process of it. When you get an idea for a song, when you get it, and you write both lyrics and music,
I do.
do you have a preference between the two?
No, because when I write lyrics only, I love that, having one job. Someone will send me music, like Joel Evans will send me some music, and just being able to write a lyric that fits his music. I love that. When I'm writing, film, television, I usually write lyrics only, working with amazing composers. But for musical theater, I love writing music for that because I feel I'm writing for characters,
All
and
right, so
you know that feeling.
I certainly do, and we'll talk a little bit more about musicals shortly. But
Yeah.
I'm just curious. The notion of writing a song is a very interesting and unique thing to do, because there are these two major elements to it. One is words and one is music,
Yes.
and the two don't necessarily meet up perfectly until you make them meet up perfectly.
Oh, that's the job, right?
That is the job, because you get your syllables wind up in the wrong emphasis, and
Oh,
suddenly it's a
yes.
problem. And so you have to find something that makes it work and have meaning and all the rest of it. So what for you typically comes first? Is it the words or the music? And that's an old question everybody asks, but it's always interesting to know.
I guess when I'm writing on my own, the lyrics come first, but sometimes lyrics and music come at the same time. When you get a
Mhm.
lyric line, and the music just falls right in because of how the lyric is pronounced, or where it sits. And what you just mentioned about getting the lyrics to fit the music, I'm working on a new musical now with Lloyd Schwartz. I don't know if you're familiar with Lloyd. He's done the Brady Bunch and Gilligan's Island
Sure.
and all that. And he had this concept for a musical, and the songs I wrote, he wrote the book and I wrote the songs. But when we went and we had a reading, and when we decided there was some rewriting that had to be done, only one song had to be written. That was the opening song, which is often the hardest song to write, right? Because you want to write hopefully into the world you're going into. And we didn't have that. And so I have written 5 drafts of that song
Wow.
because I was trying to make lyrics and music fit. And also I wanted his input. There were certain words that he didn't like, so we went back and forth. Anyway, I'm talking about musicals before you wanted to
That's all right. It's still songwriting, which is very important, because
Yeah.
you're still writing songs in a musical. I want to talk about musical theater as sort of a separate concept, but songwriting is still songwriting either way. Though there's an added element in musical theater, which is you're adding character and story, or two elements actually, that you're adding those elements that you may have in a one-off song, but you may also not necessarily have in a one-off song.
That's right.
So do you have a regular routine that you go through when you write a song? Is there something you do standard every time, or is it switch up every time you write a song?
I think it's always new, depending on who I'm working with, or if it's a certain project. It's always, I don't think I can't think of a standard way. It's just whatever the project or the song calls for. If I get the music first, I listen before I start writing. I listen to it till I know it.
Mm-hmm.
Then I feel I know it, and then I can start working on it.
So you have to hear it really in your head, don't you?
Hear it in your head and feel it also. What is this music saying? And will the lyric fit this music properly?
And that includes the tone of the song, the way the song feels. The words have to fit that tone.
Absolutely. Yeah,
so,
you know that. That.
I do know that. I know it quite well, and it is a trick. I mean, you have to work at that. It doesn't. Some people, I think, I could be wrong, but I think there are some people that are naturally gifted at it, and it just flows from them. I know that you can talk from my favorite songwriter again. This is from musicals, is Sondheim, and he worked his tail off at it. It didn't come naturally to him. He worked very hard.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it shows in the fluidity of his work. So I compare that to the great dancers, Gene Kelly, Fred Astaire, and so on. They would work hundreds and hundreds of hours to make it look effortless.
That's the idea, I think, and that's true with a song too, to make it seem like it took 5 minutes to write. It didn't. Some songs do. Some just come quickly to songwriters, but for the most part, songwriters work very hard at making something work really well.
So when you're writing a song that's not for the musical theater, where there's not necessarily a character involved or a storyline involved, do you think of the audience that's going to listen to it while you're writing it, or are you your own audience?
Oh, that's a wonderful question. I think I'm the first audience.
Of course, sure.
And my writing partner, we are the first audience. And I think when we write for ourselves and we feel good about it, then we start thinking about the audience. Who would this be good for? And unless we are trying to write for a specific audience, then you kind of have to think of the audience. But I think mostly, like, for example, when I'm writing with Joe, that there is a specific audience for that. It's people who love standards, and we like to call new standards. We're brazen enough to call them new standards.
But it has the flavor of the original standards.
Absolutely, yeah.
So you would recognize it, which if we're going to hear one of those songs today,
yes.
it has the feeling of a jazz standard, but it's a brand new song.
Yes, exactly.
And I think that there's a place for those. It's a wonderful thing. The shame of it today, well, of course, the whole music industry has been stood on its head for some time now, but the shame of it is that songs like that don't really get a lot of play anywhere unless it's in a show or something like that.
That's true. I just happen to love that style, and so does Joe. And every now and again, it works for us to get it into a film or TV show, which is wonderful, and that happens. Sometimes songs get used more than once in different film and TV shows, but that's where most of these new standards that we're writing are fitting right now. Although there are artists out there, not always easy to get to, that do sing these songs. So every now and again we try to reach out.
Sure.
Some of them are now writing on their own, so they don't want us.
Well, that's a whole other issue.
Yeah.
So you alluded to earlier the notion of song structure, verse, chorus, and so on. How important is song structure to the success of a song?
I don't know. I mean, I can think of song structure is important because things, when people hear hooks, they get hooked into the hook of a song, and they remember it more than if there isn't a structure. I mean, I'm trying to think, do you agree with that? Does that work for you?
I think my feeling is that structure is requisite for someone to actually understand what the song is if it just sort of went into different musical things over and over and over again, you wouldn't know where to land.
Yeah.
So there is a structure helps an audience to understand this song goes from here to here to here. It has a beginning, middle, and end, and here's how it works. But structure itself is different in different pieces. So it's a curious act.
Yeah.
You know, and so how does it work? How does structure work? Well, you know, we could talk about this, I'm sure, for quite some time, but structure sort of sets a song up and then delivers on whatever the core of the song is.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, your favorite Sondheim. I mean, he's a structure freak, right? I mean, structure is very important to him.
Extremely.
Yeah,
Extremely.
And it worked extremely well for him, you know.
Extremely. So, all right. So what do you do aside from just doing the work? Is there anything you do aside from that that helps to inspire you with the work? Do you read certain things? Do you watch certain things? Do you listen to certain music? What do you do that inspires you to, you know, to find what it is you're trying to figure out?
Well, always, you know, listening to other songs that are out there, songs that are coming out now. Many of them don't relate to the kind of songs I like to write or that I'm working on writing on, but I do listen to other songs. I reading something. Sometimes you just read a book and there can be a scene in a book that happen, or a certain chapter in a book that sort of inspires a song idea. I keep a list of song titles, something, or sometimes people say things, people give us song titles. They'll say something and I go, oh my God, I have to write that down. That is really good.
So you like me, I'm gathering, you're trying to take in the whole world all the time.
Absolutely.
And not necessarily intentionally, but it's all there all the time.
Mm-hmm. That's true. I think it is. Yeah, it's around us. I mean, you look out, there's a patio out this window here and just look at what the birds are doing out there. And, you know, sometimes just looking at nature, you know, something comes to you. Depends wherever you are. Or if I'm out taking a long walk, you know, I always keep a notebook with me. So I can write something.
So that's a great tip right there, is to always have some ability to jot something down. I happen to put things down now in my phone.
Yes,
I used to carry a notepad with me, but I don't do that anymore.
No, that's fine. It works with a phone too.
Sure.
Device on your phone. Yeah.
Sure. And whether I'm saying something, I can actually speak into the phone, but I can also jot it down in an app called Notes, or there are many apps that do that. It's a very highly recommended thing for people to do, is to have something to write it down. Why? Because you'll forget.
And invariably, if I don't write it down or speak it, I will forget. I don't know. And watching TV shows too. I'll watch some of the song shows that are on, hear what people are doing. And I'm not probably going to write something that they write, but somebody, again, might sing a line that triggers a thought, you know, so there's that too.
Indeed. I mean, and so ideas are coming to you from everywhere.
Everywhere, anywhere in the world.
And all of your reading, all of your viewing, all of your talking to your friends and neighbors and so on, that's triggering one response or another. Sometimes something is good and sometimes it just flows by you. Yes.
Exactly.
Is there any one thing that you can think of that you consistently do over and over again when you're trying to figure out how to write a song? Is there any one particular thing that you consistently do? Or conversely, is there any one thing that you consistently now avoid? Over time, you've learned I'm never going to do that.
I can't think of any nevers, but one thing I do is I've decided to never edit myself when I'm starting. You know, just whatever comes in, write it down. Or I'm at the computer, I type fast. So I can sit at the computer if I'm working on a lyric, and whatever comes out, don't edit and say, no, that's not good. Just type it, because it's going to lead to something else. So I edit later, you know, do the structure later, but let the ideas, any idea, just let it flow onto paper, on the computer, in your voice memo, whatever, just let it flow.
So you started out writing songs, both, I assume, at first by yourself, right?
Yes, I did.
And then you eventually started to collaborate with various other artists.
That's right.
So I'm just curious about collaboration. I love to talk about collaboration. I've both collaborated with many people and I've worked a lot on my own. And they both have their advantages and disadvantages.
Yeah.
What is it about collaboration with others that you find helpful and that you enjoy?
And this is one of the things you said, when you're talking about, you wanted to eventually later talk about advice. I mean, this is an incredible piece of advice. Being able to collaborate with people is just essential. Just as having an open mind. I mean, you might have a concept for a song, and if you start collaborating with someone and that person is giving you a line that doesn't really fit with what you have in mind, you need to stay open to it, because it can lead somewhere else. So I think just being open to other people's suggestions. We get that in theater a lot, as you know, I'm sure I keep saying, as you know, and you do, I know you do.
I do, for sure. It is, depending upon how intense that collaboration is, because some collaborations, if you're writing a song with an artist, that collaboration is probably, in the grand scheme of things, going to be relatively short-lived. It's not going to be months and months and years and years. But
No.
if you're writing a musical with someone, it could be months and months and years and years.
And that's like a marriage. I mean, it has to work. You have to be literally on the same page for, all the time.
And and without naming names, has it happened for you where you weren't on the same page with someone?
Yes.
and that was uncomfortable, I assume.
Oh my God, it was awful. I won't mention any names,
Right.
but there was a person who was just not a happy person, and he was a book writer, and he just could not be. He was hostile. I mean, I would get terrible hostile phone calls. I mean, who wants to work with somebody like that? So, and I would come home all upset at rehearsals, and I would say to my husband, I need a sign that I should be quitting this project. And the next morning, hanging from the dining room chandelier was, you need to quit this musical.
Well, that's a literal and physical sign.
Yes.
I think my experiences, and I've had a few of them, my experiences have always led to, and I didn't know it till years later in my life. Took years to understand it, that typically someone like what you're describing, who is hostile or angry or ticked off at the world or whatever it is, that it's typically insecurity.
Yeah.
And they are insecure about what they're doing, and it comes out in unpleasant ways.
Yeah, I mean, we're all insecure to some extent, but that's an extreme.
That's how it's reflected in that particular individual.
Yeah.
And so my note to anyone listening to this is, if you're dealing with someone who is like that and you're not sure what to do, try and think, what is causing them to be insecure? And maybe you can find a way to upend the hostility just by virtue of figuring out what's causing them to be hostile. And that's usually that they're afraid of something within themselves.
Yeah, I think that's true.
And I hate to be armchair psychologist, because I'm not a psychologist, but that to me has pretty much been what it's been for quite some time. And so I think that, it's unfortunate. I'm glad you did get out of it, because you needed to get out of it.
Absolutely. It was difficult because, we had songs that I really loved, that I had written with another person. And so it's hard to let those go.
Were you able to walk away with any of it, or was it just lost?
It was just lost.
It was lost. And that's the shame of it. Sometimes you do lose pieces of your work, and you can't do anything with it, and that's it.
No, that's it.
You could theoretically, I mean, again, we're talking about something, maybe I'm talking out of my hat, but you could theoretically take the words away, strip the words off, and go make something else of them, because unless they're actually joined through some sort of production, usually the copyright still remains yours.
That's true, but these songs are all character driven.
There you go.
So So
they're lost in that. Well, that's a good segue into talking about musicals. What is it about musicals, and maybe you've already said it, that attracted you in the first place, aside from Barbara Streisand in Funny Girl?
Well, she struck that match, started the fire.
What is it about musicals? What's special about them for you?
I guess I love hearing characters sing something that moves me.
Mhm.
I love stories. I love seeing a story, with people expressing emotion through song. I just love that. Um, I grew up on movie musicals, Gene Kelly and all of those. So I love those, and Rodgers and Hammerstein, and it's sort of hard to describe. They just hit me. They just fill me with passion.
Is it that you are getting an elongated form of not a song, but many songs that then tell a story? It's the
Yeah,
storytelling, I
yeah,
think, probably for you.
yeah. Definitely the storytelling, being able to tell a full story with character, with people singing. To me, that it's an amazing thing to be able to do.
So I'm going to ask you a question. I pretty much know what your answer is going to be, but I always like
Okay.
to ask it anyway. So of the three legs of a musical, book, music, and lyrics, which eventually form the thing called the libretto, which is all the words, is in your thinking, is one of those legs more important than the other?
To me, they're all important, but
Mhm.
I think, for our audiences out there, music is what gets to people first. I know people who go to musicals who don't even remember lyrics. They just remember how a song felt. Um, so I'm thinking music might be it. Although for me, lyrics are ultra important. And most recently, I work on a project where I'm writing all three. So I mean, I just value them all. I mean, they're all the book. I mean, you can't, the songs are not going to do well. You know this too. The songs are not going to do well if the book doesn't work, if the story doesn't work. So
Well, the old adage, of course, is that if you go to a musical and you walk out humming the songs, you probably don't remember the book. But if you walk out hating the show, you will remember that
You
the
remember
book stunk.
yeah,
And so that is really kind of a critical thing, that the book is correct, which is, and it's one of the reasons why I really harp on story structure, because that's what makes a lot of shows work, is story structure. Of course, characters have to be right. Everything has to be correct. There's a million little pieces and parts to it.
yeah.
But the structure itself is super important to making a show function. Without it, you've got what? Nothing really. You got a concert.
Nothing.
You've got a concert of songs.
That's right. That's right. Exactly. Exactly.
And so you're now writing a musical that's all three legs: book, music, lyrics.
I am. It's a. I can tell you a little bit about it if you.
You're welcome to tell us about it, or not tell us about it if you can't talk about it. One or the other.
No, I can't. I'm happy to. It's a first for me because I tried to find a book writer and I couldn't find anyone who really wanted to jump in. For in my other life as an editor, freelance writer, editor, proofreader, I love playing with words, which is why I love writing lyrics. I worked for more than 25 years as a writer editor for a 5-time black belt martial artist.
Wow.
And he said something to me that rhymes, but it just also, it's one of those things that grabs your heart, your soul, whatever. He said, the highest goal of the martial arts is to stop a fight before it starts. And I thought, oh my God, it's the answer to world peace. If you can stop a fight inside yourself, you won't fight with another person. And so I just started developing this concept. And of course, I know there's a big Broadway musical that's being worked on now with that involves martial arts. But this is very different. This is something that I would like to see in schools for kids who are being bullied and for kids who are bullies, or in universities where bullying is going on. And anyway, I have started I've got a website, Empty Hands. It's called Empty Hands. Is the name of the musical. It's emptyhandsthemusical.com.
Okay.
And there's a video on a 5-minute marketing video on there. If anybody thinks they're interested, it's the video is directed by the amazing Kay Cole and Kevin Bailey, who's a Broadway actor. He plays the sensei, and we have a bunch of wonderful, diverse kids who are in the video. So I'm just looking to get it out in the world and just see if we can. But it's my first time working on all three. And so that's a challenge for me, right? I mean, I've witnessed and watched and heard many books, but I've never written one. So I'm a little nervous about it, but delighted.
Have you started to get feedback on it?
Been getting some feedback, and we're talking. I can't say with whom right now. We're talking with some schools about possibly getting it on its feet. So we'll see. We'll see.
All right. So in other words, this is a unique experience for you because
It
you're
is.
you're not used to writing the dialogue
No, I'm
and
not.
and also creating essentially the whole story.
That's correct. Yeah. Mhm.
And so, all right. So what are the challenges you're facing then? What are the biggest challenges you're facing and how are you handling that? How are you dealing with them?
The greatest challenge for me is when we did our first reading is I decided to ask the kids who were in the cast and just say, would you say that? And they were wonderful. They say, no. What would you say instead? And they tell me, and I went, oh, okay. No writing credit for you on this, but I'm going to change it. Okay. Okay. So anyway, there are certain words like their kids, it was a group, or should I call it a squad, or just lingo that kids would use right now. So that was the greatest challenge for me because I'm not in their age group, and but my heart is.
You,
So
and those age groups, they keep shifting.
they do.
And so, the beauty part of writing for children or for writing kids material is the audience replenishes itself every 3 or 4 years.
That's right. That's
You
right.
just keep getting a new audience that doesn't know anything about you or your work. And they're
That's
fresh.
true.
They're fresh to it constantly. So that's why animation works so well.
Oh, you're right. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this project I'm working on, it could be an animated thing. There's that too. We've been talking to people.
So your solution to not knowing today's lingo is to hang out with kids who know today's lingo.
Yeah, exactly.
And is it the same for the lyrics?
Lyrics too. Yeah, I've made some changes based on some things the kids told me when we were doing the reading, and even working on the video. I'd say, is there anything in the lyric that you don't feel comfortable with that you wouldn't say? And there were a couple things. But I also want to do my best to keep it as universal and timeless as I can, so that with the generations changing, I don't want to get lingo that just sticks into a decade and then disappears.
Well, that is a problem. When you write almost any show that is going to be dated in a relatively short period of time, you're running that risk that the show's not going to have a long life. And in the theater, you're trying to have a little bit of longevity.
Yeah, that's right.
And so, it's challenging to not use items, things, philosophies, ways of being that are of a specific period. Weirdly, unless you're writing something that's many, many generations ago and you're writing something from the past, then it can live on forever. A good example, Les Miserables.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, or frankly, my own show, Jekyll and Hyde, that's from Victorian England.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if I may ask you, and for Jekyll and Hyde, it was an extraordinary musical. I've seen it more than once. And that, by the way, is the first time I saw Kevin Bailey, when I saw him do your show.
Cool.
No, what I want to ask you is, I mean, your show has a long life. To what do you attribute that, its long life?
It is, well, first of all, the same thing you said earlier, there are songs in it that people love that are somewhat timeless, and that's extremely helpful. And I think it's a show of passion, but more importantly, it's a show, curiously enough, that pretty much everybody thinks that they know the story going in. They know that it's going to be a guy who takes some kind of a chemical some way and becomes two different people, becomes his inner id comes out. But almost nobody really has read the novella and don't really understand that there's no romance in the underlying story, and that there are no women in the story, the original Robert Louis Stevenson novella. And so what makes it work is that love story, the dual love story between the good girl and the bad girl, and then one guy who's two. And because it's a famous Gothic horror story, that has kept it afloat a long time, along with the fact that it's got some amazing songs in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And we all love the good girls and the bad girls. So, it works really well.
That's correct. And they both have, they're both actually at heart good. Leo Tolstoy once famously said that the best stories come from good versus good. which is an interesting thing if you think about it, because if an audience is rooting for both sides, both protagonist and antagonist, suddenly the conflict is even higher. And that's what we all want, is we want conflict, right?
Yeah, that's
And-
great. I love
And
that.
Hyde is evil, but somewhere inside of him is still Jekyll.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
it is kind of, you're rooting good versus good.
yeah, yeah. Well done.
Well, thank you. There's a huge degree of luck involved. Believe me, you're just hitting certain things. You know that when you're writing, you think you're writing good stuff, but you don't really know until somebody else tells you it's good or not.
Yeah, and you write what you feel, you want to write, or what's important to you, and hopefully other people will think so too, right?
Well, exactly. So, all right. So when you're writing, how important is it for you to have well-developed characters to write songs for?
Very important, very important. I mean, how do you write a song for a character if you don't know who that person is?
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, that will happen sometimes in a book where you don't really know who the character is. So then it becomes up to you to show a part of that character, I guess, emotionally in the song. I guess that's where I would go with it. And for example, in the musical I'm working on now with Lloyd Schwartz, which is again, it's another big musical on this subject happening now. But Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony, Lloyd is very interested in their relationship and their friendship. And there was a song called "More to Life" that I just wanted Elizabeth to sing, and it didn't really fit in the script. But I wrote that song to just show a part of her that felt that she's home, she's having kids, she's cooking, she has no time for anything, but she feels there's something else she needs to be doing in her life. And I thought that could relate to most of us. You feel, you get the sense that. So anyway, he found a place for it. So it's in there, which is good. But I found that I had to reach for that because it wasn't in the script.
What do you mean you had to reach for it?
I had to think about who she is and what she might be wanting.
Did that require you to do a bunch of research on your own?
Yeah, well, there was a book that we were working out of that had a history of the women, those two in particular, and I don't know, something in the book just triggered this thought that she kept saying, her relationship with her husband is he traveled a lot, he was always away, and so she felt like he wasn't interested in her life, and so she keeps saying he's out there doing all these things. Maybe I should be doing something too, which was an amazing thought for somebody a woman 100 years ago. So.
Is there anything that you do in particular to then develop the character through song versus dialogue?
Gosh.
I mean, it's a little bit of a trick to do, because you have both elements. Unless you're writing an opera, you have both dialogue and song, and both the dialogue and the songs, the lyrics should push a character forward as a character.
Absolutely, and hopefully you're moving forward in time too. Gosh. I know. I feel I have to stand in that person's shoes. I mean, you probably do that too. You stand in that person's shoes and just think, what would that person be thinking right now? What would that person be doing? What does that person want? It's always, I think, a matter of
So
want.
is there something you're thinking about? Okay, so the question is about song spotting, because that's part of what's going on here. You've decided this is going to be a song, not dialogue. This moment is going to be sung, not spoken. And is there some kind of criterion that you think about that says one is one or the other?
Well, when we're first, starting, when Lloyd and I are working on this Elizabeth and Susan project, I tend to overwrite. I just write every 5 pages. If there's something I can write a song for, I'll just do that and just write a song. And then when we see the reading, we just see that really should not be a song. That should be dialogue, and just so it gets pulled out. I can sense that better once there's a reading of the whole thing, and then I can feel it. I can't always feel it when it's just on the page. That's why we go to the stage, right? Because you can't always tell by just reading. I can't.
I think most people can't either. And I have asked that question. I didn't ask you that question, but I should have, which is, can you tell on the page whether or not it's going to work? And the answer really is Not really. You
No,
might
you
have
said
you might think it does.
yeah, yeah, exactly. You might think it does. Like, for example, he wanted the Susan B. Anthony, she's babysitting Elizabeth's kids and wanted her to read a bedtime story. And he thought about David and Goliath. And so I went, okay, I'm writing a David and Goliath song. So I just wrote the song. And then as soon as we saw the reading, I just went, no.
Just didn't work.
No, it should be really short and read the story, really short version of the story, and we move forward in time.
So you're saying your trick to song spotting is to put a song in and try it.
Yeah, exactly. I love song spotting, finding a place for a song that gives me a reason to live.
When you've worked on your other musicals, did you already have a story and some kind of a play, for lack of a better word, or a book prior to deciding where the songs went? Or has it always been developed jointly?
Well, with Inside Out, I'm pointing the poster up here,
Yes.
that I wrote with Doug Haverty. I had been in a women's therapy group, and so he just wanted me to talk to him about what was in the group. And so I had one song. We were both members of the Lehman Engel Musical Theater Workshop at the time.
Nice.
And so that's how we met. And I would bring songs in there and people say, oh, it's a really good song. I'd bring a book in and they'd say, it's not working. So fortunately, I got Doug to say yes and to work on the project, thankfully. And he, aside from two songs actually that I had written, he wanted to write book first and just write based on what I was telling him about my experience in there. So I waited for him to write, except for one or two songs. And the two songs wound up staying in the show. But I didn't write then until he had written these characters and he was writing characters that I told him were in my group, but they became his characters. I mean, he didn't make them exactly those people who were in my group. They were, he enhanced them greatly.
It's for the listeners who don't know, tell them what the BMI Lehman Engel Workshop is.
It's well, if you go see the musical Tick, Tick, Boom, you'll see it in progress. It's a workshop started by famous conductor Lehman Engel many years ago to help people writing for musical theater, book writers, lyricists, composers, how to develop musicals. And he's written many books. I don't know about many. There are two I know for sure.
One called Music and Lyrics.
Music and Lyrics. There's another one. I just can't think of the title.
Me either.
If you Google Lehman Engel, Lehman, Engel, Engel, you'll find them.
And how important was that workshop for you?
Extremely important, extremely, because I would, memory, maybe this is one of those quirky things, I don't know, but I brought in a song. He gave us an assignment to write a song for an ad from a magazine. So I brought in a song about called More, about cigarettes. And it was funny. It was making fun of smoking. And then 20 minutes later, I got called up to write a song from a musical I was working on. And he said, how could the same person who wrote that first song write this? So it was just one of those moments where I went, oh my God, and then after that session, he came up and he said, no, I don't want you to be upset. He said, that first song was really good.
But was he a harsh critic?
He was a harsh critic, but I think that's can be a good thing. I like working with people who are honest and straightforward. If I don't know what you really think, then we can't move forward. Don't you feel that way too?
I do, and I do think to a certain extent, a harsh critic is more helpful than a soft critic, because the business itself is harsh, and the audience is going to be, without you knowing them, they're going to be as harsh as can be. If they don't like your work, they're going to tell you by walking out and telling everyone else to stay away from your show. And that's harsh. So better to have it in the working part of the, your piece than later on when it's not working at all.
Exactly. I agree. 100%. Yeah.
Well, yeah. So when you're working, how many drafts do you typically do before you're ready to, let's say, show it to someone else?
That varies. When I have a first draft, I usually sit with it for a while. Are you talking about a song or a whole?
Well, let's talk about a song first, and then we'll talk about a musical.
Okay.
Songs
yeah,
are a little faster for obvious reasons. They're short.
yeah, they're shorter, right? A first draft I will write and I think, oh, I think I like that. That's really good. But then I put it away. I go to sleep. The next morning I get up and look at it. And then I start the next morning, I instantly see things that I want to change. So I would say I venture a guess of 4 drafts before I will send it to a collaborator. Because I know even when I send it to collaborator, it's going to change some more.
Almost no question. Have you ever sent a draft off to someone and they said perfect and that was it?
Well, it doesn't happen often, but
No.
it has happened.
Almost always somebody wants to put their 2 cents in because they're looking at it differently. And you also, I think, as you're working, I think, at least I do, you tend to lose sight of the forest for the trees, that old cliche.
It's true.
And so it's useful to have that second set of eyes or third set of eyes or however many sets of eyes you have.
Mhm.
And that's why you do workshops.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly why.
So all right. So drafts in terms of writing a musical, how many?
Well, for my Empty Hands musical, that I think the same process applies where I write it and then of course that's much longer, there's a lot more pages there to look through and digest. Again, the next morning I look at it and with a full draft, I wait more than just a day or two. I think let it sit for several days.
That seems fast to me. I let it go for sometimes days. Occasionally it'll be a couple of weeks. If I finished a draft, I'll let it go for a while.
Well, that's probably a smart thing to do. Let it go for a couple of weeks.
It gives me what I think of as a little artistic perspective.
Although when I do send to a collaborator and then the collaborator comes back with other thoughts, and then it gives you time to, do
Well,
more.
sure. Well, that is a little different. When you're working
Yeah.
with someone and you get feedback from them, then probably you want to address it relatively now, so it's fresh.
Yeah. Yeah.
But if it's something I'm writing on my own,
Mhm.
I might let it sit aside for more than a few days in order to let it sort of no longer be in that forest for the trees problem.
Yeah, I think that's wise. I think waiting, several days or, a week, even 2 weeks, I think that is wise because then you are going to be away. You're in the world again, or you're working on something else, and you come back and you're going to see it with fresh eyes. So I think that's wise.
All right. So what do you do to stay on target and on deadline when I assume you've worked under deadline and you've also worked where there was no deadline. They're 2 totally different ways to think. When you're on deadline, what do you do? Does the deadline drives you? Yes.
Absolutely. Nothing like a deadline.
Nothing like a deadline. I agree with you. I love deadlines.
Yeah, they make you work. And if it means staying up all night, that's what you do, yeah, absolutely.
All right. How do you stay on target when you don't have a deadline? How do you stay motivated?
I don't need to be I am just a motivated person. And so I don't need to get pushed by anybody to move faster or to do more. I am on it. And if somebody sends me, unless I'm working on something else that distracts me, as soon as a collaborator sends me some thoughts or things to possibly change, if I have that time in that day, I'm just going to get right on it. I'm just highly motivated I just love doing the work.
You get up ready to go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Have you ever had any kind of problem or blockage, or you couldn't figure out what you were doing? Has that ever happened to you?
It doesn't because, I am an editor. I edit other people's work,
Right.
Writing, but I just flow. I just like to just flow with whatever's happening. Is that a proper answer to your question?
Sure, it's an answer. It sounds to me like what you're saying is the flow itself just keeps driving you forward in some way.
It really does. And I feel like, when we're writing, it's never finished, right? You just want to keep writing and writing. Even when it's supposedly finished, you think of other things that come up. In a recording studio and with one song and somebody's singing the song. And just by the way that person is singing the song, you think, that word is not good. I need to change that. So it seems to never end.
Do you actually change it on the fly when you're in the studio?
I have.
And made a big difference, didn't it?
It did. I'm always interested in making a song or a play better. Whatever we can do to make it better.
Mm-hmm. Well, I have been speaking for almost an hour now with
oh my gosh, wow,
the great songwriter Adryan Russ, and we're going to wind this down a little bit. And so you've obviously been around a lot of people in the entertainment industry, and you've done many different projects with many different things. Do you have a particularly quirky, weird, offbeat, strange, or just plain funny story, or maybe something that's passionate or emotional? Do you have some kind of a story you can share with us?
Well, this is, again, I'm more of an emotional person than a quirky, funny person.
Right.
But a thing that happened when Inside Out, my musical, opened at the Cherry Lane off-Broadway, Doug and I, we were getting ready to open, and we went to a Thai restaurant for dinner, and the fortune cookies came, and this was after, my two brothers came and saw the musical. My parents were already long gone, so. Right. Unfortunately, you always want your parents to see what you're doing, So anyway, Doug and I had our dinner, and we opened our fortune cookies, and I opened my fortune cookie, and I still have it in a picture frame. It says, "Your parents are proud to hear of your progress."
Wow.
You don't get fortune cookie fortunes like that.
No.
So that just, I still get chills even saying it now, because I just sort of felt like somehow they knew.
Did your parents both knew of what you were doing, that you were a songwriter?
They did know that, but they never saw musicals happen. They were gone way before that.
Did it give you chills?
It did. It still does,
That's a little freaky when that happens. Yeah.
It was a little freaky. Yeah.
Talk about a sign not hanging from your chandelier.
Yeah. I was in New York right before the pandemic. I was there for a story for the SEL magazine, and I went to that restaurant, and the owner was still there. And I said, do you still have fortune cookies? And he said, "Oh no, we stopped doing that a long time ago." And so I told him what happened. He said, "That's impossible. The fortunes never say that." And I said, "Yeah, I know."
That one did.
That one did. Yeah.
All right. Last question for you today, Adryan. You've already given us a ton of really wonderful advice throughout this whole show.
I can't believe the hour has gone by. It's amazing.
It is. It flies by when you're having fun.
Yeah.
Do you have a solid piece of advice or a tip that you can perhaps lend to those who are just starting out in the business, or maybe they've started into the business, but they're trying to get to the next level?
I would just say to write what you know best, write from your heart, because that's where your best songs are going to come from. When I wrote "The Better Love Is, the Worse It Is When It's Over," that was true for me. So also, when you write from personal experience, that is, I think, the best songs come from there. And also, we already talked about collaboration, but just know how to be a good collaborator. Open your heart, open your mind to collaborating with other people. It's really important, and they tend to like you better when you do that. Ask them questions instead of just talking about you.
Oh, that's such a great piece of advice. And I tell people that particular piece all the time, that it's better to ask questions than to tell people stuff, because that brings them into the flow of what you're trying to achieve.
Yeah, absolutely.
I think that's a terrific piece of advice. There was several pieces of advice in there, all very valuable and terrific. Well, this has been a terrific hour on StoryBeat. And
thank you so much. Thank you. And thank you for doing this. It's been joyful. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you for being on the show. And I really appreciate you spending the time with me.
My pleasure.
Well, as promised, please sit back now, because we have a real treat for you. Enjoy two of Adryan's songs, if you will, please. "Top of the World," written with Joel Evans and sung by Adam James, and "Matters of the Heart," co-written with Doug Haverty and sung by Tammy Tappan Damiano.
I'm loving this mood I'm in. Where has this feeling been? The clouds are all gone and the sun is shining so bright. I'm seeing the light here at the top of the world. everything's looking up, ready to fill my cup. A brand new beginning with lots of promise inside. I'm feeling so right here at the top of the world. At last I can hear my heart begin to hum. It sings because it knows the best has finally come. Never had such a thrill. I'm praying I always will. Now I can see that better days were way overdue. It's crystal clear, it's meant to be. It's all right here in front of me. Oh, what a view here at the top of the world. To hum. It sings because it knows the best has finally come. Never had such a thrill. I'm praying I always will. Now I can see that better days were way overdue. It's crystal clear, it was meant to be. It's all right here in front of me. Oh, what a view here at the top of the world. Here at the top of the world. Here at the top of the world.
Choose a path and follow it through. But life is much more than a blueprint or chart. What matters are matters of the heart. Anyone can study, research and advise. Logic alone doesn't make you wise. That you feel play a very big part. What matters are matters of the heart. Why cover your ears when intuition calls? It's so hard to hear when we're building walls. The mind speaks loud, but it isn't smarter. To whisper, so you have to listen harder. Anyone can settle, put up a fence, and say staying put is common sense. But miracles can happen when you make a new start and focus on matters of the heart. So what if the things you're frightened of come true? You wind remember what matters, what matters of the
And so we've come to the end of today's Story Beat. If you like this episode, won't you please take a moment to give us a comment, rating, or review on whatever app or platform you're listening to. Your support helps us bring more great Story Beat episodes to you. Story Beat is available on all major podcast apps and platforms, including Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, TuneIn, and many others. Until next time, I'm Steve Cuden, and may all your stories be unforgettable.